All right, I'm joined today by Alyssa Hinz, who is a risk and compliance analyst. Alyssa, thanks for taking time to chat today.
Absolutely. You're going to have to add me as a co-host. You keep having me back so many times.
Star billing at all times. So Alyssa and I were chatting offline, and so this is going to be a bit different format. So in terms of topic, we're going to talk a little bit about security metrics and some associated areas of security metrics, and we kind of called it "Why do we measure what we measure?" But we may change the title depending on what we do here and what we talk about next. Um, so we were talking about security metrics, and the first point we talked about was why we're OCD for green dashboards. Why do we
Well,
like
I
green?
mean, it definitely green makes us look good. Green is good, and that's of course what we want to show people is we've made all this great progress, and now everything is super secure. But and I know that we were discussing like Pongo or Pongy
Pongi
pics or
sticks, the
whatever, but
hidden find the hidden issues in the green dashboard.
exactly. Find the hidden issues in your green dashboard. That sea of green is hiding some man trap within it that is, somebody's going to take a step thinking this is solid ground. We're secure here. And they're going to fall straight through that sea of green into a big pit of red that could kick off a potentially serious incident.
Yeah, I think part of what we talked about, and this is worth discussing, is maybe it's green because we're only showing the things that reflect wellness. Maybe there's a whole bunch of stuff we're not showing people.
Right, right. And a lot of that not showing can come from different externalities. It's not always that we want to only show the things that make us look good. There's definitely reasons that we should be showing, areas that are being neglected, areas in red and orange and yellow, that kind of are less matured and less focused on in a lot of cases because they're not as much fun to do. Honestly, I mean, who wants to work on documentation and compliance all day? But a lot of times, there, especially if you see a sea of green in compliance, there can be hidden issues there that you need to break further down to elevate those issues to the right people. A
Well,
lot of times, though,
and also we got green, yellow, and red, and what do they mean, right? So we've talked in the past
yeah.
about FAIR and risk thresholds and risk appetite, and then you can get back to a very existential question, which is why is something green, yellow, or red, and what does that mean? And so, do people understand? As an executive, should they ask why is that green?
Oh, absolutely. Because anything that is green, yellow, or red, or low, medium, high, critical, something that doesn't have like an actual defendable numerical value next to it somehow, you should always be asking, how did you arrive at these conclusions? What's underneath this green that built it up to being this green? And are there any hidden time bombs in there that could be waiting to blow up?
Well, yeah, especially if you're a board member. So if you're on a
Right.
yeah, you're on the board of directors and security or IT rolls in with a report card, any report card, and it all looks green. Should you focus even more on asking in-depth questions? Should that raise more red flags? Should you be more concerned? And I think you should.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm only an analyst. Being only an analyst, the reports that I give that get elevated up to kind of that macro chair level or board level, they obviously get edited along the way. And a lot of times it can make it up there without some of these more serious issues very effectively called out, because there is that desire to present ourselves as having done good and done well, and you know all of this is fantastic. Because if there is red on a report, a lot of people are going to ask, well, what have you been doing? We've got all this green, but why is this still red?
Yeah,
um,
and I've had
and
that discussion, so preparing a board report and showing it to a company officer, and the question was, why would you ever show them that? It was literally, why would you show them a report with red? Because the only thing they're going to want to talk about is what's red. And
well, those things may need to be talked about. If they're not being addressed at lower levels and you can't get them addressed as a security person through your normal escalation processes, then there may be a point, and that is part of why in my opinion, it is incumbent upon board members and chair people within the organization to ask about these seas of green that they see and what is underneath that is rolling up into this very good picture. Because obviously with the increase of ransomware attacks across various industries and continued
yeah,
other forms of phishing and malware and all of that, we have some serious pitfalls as a career group in this country, it would seem, where we're not addressing some serious issues that are leaving wide gaps to be exploited.
yeah, I've thought about, third-party risk management, or if you're a board member, it's almost like you can consider the people coming in to give you a report as third-party risk, right? Because these are, people you don't work directly with. They represent a company, and you're there to assess the trustworthiness of what they're representing to you. If I could only ask one question, it would probably be, do you have a BIA? Can you show it to me? I think I would reduce it to that at its most fundamental level.
And that would show some level, in my opinion, of baselining. Here's what our processes look like in an optimum environment. And here's how, and then you can build off of that. Here's how that data moves through our environment. And here's where we have protections around data or networking equipment or physical security.
Well, I think, does IT and security, do they understand how the company actually works? That's what I get from a BIA.
Definitely, definitely.
So from a vulnerable, so here's what I guess, we've talked through, what why security sometimes represents things as green, and sometimes it's security, sometimes you're right. The reports get edited along the way. People, uh, you know, add or subtract things, and there's always an urge to represent to the board that everything's going well and on plan. And um,
And I don't think any of this is malicious
no,
either. It's one, self-interest and self-preservation, but it's also it's showing the business what they want to see. Here's what we've accomplished, and that's a lot of times what they are asking for is what have you accomplished. But they don't understand that despite all of these things that may have gotten accomplished since the last board meeting, since the last report, or what have you, that there may be all these other areas that are being seriously neglected. And that is part of why you should have a baseline against, regulations that are applicable to your business and any sort of frameworks that you use as far as measuring your security effectiveness and your security controls.
well, and just tying it back to the, little bit of the discussion we had about FAIR and risk quantification, not directly quantifying, but that what is the potential for loss? And if you're showing everything green and there's a potential for a big loss because you're not patching regularly, maybe patching's not up to snuff, and now you have a ransomware issue. Um, could that be, I don't know if malpractice is the right word, but you know,
If we're going to call out the Optiv piece, then let's just call out the Optiv piece and talk about information security as malpractice? And do we do we as information security practitioners have a level of care that we should be providing to the enterprise, and a sort of do no harm oath within information security that says, these are serious issues. We can't just look at things that we've accomplished. We have to look at all of these pieces um, as a holistic entity, because information security cannot be separated out from the business.
Right.
Information security is a part of the business and it protects the business. And it's kind of, if you want to put it in medical terms, it's kind of an immune system in a way. And our job is to ensure that that immune system is functioning and that we're measuring and checking back in with our immune system,
Right.
um,
The resistance strength. So, I mean, like
to ensure that we're
yeah, a lot of us are taking,
able to protect.
shots for COVID, right, for pandemic, and we absolutely
Right.
want to know how effective each one of those different shots are. And people spend a lot of time going, well, this one's 97%, this one's 94, and this one's, 87 or something.
Right, right. And then what can those, and fully on board with getting vaccinated. Please go get your COVID shots. But what could the effects of those vaccines be? And a lot of people, they take a look at those risks versus the risk of COVID, and they make these decisions on whether or not to get vaccinated based on that. But how are they ensuring that they have all that information? And that is, as information security practitioners, part of our job is ensuring that the business has all the information possible to appropriately weigh the risks of, do we remediate this versus
Right.
do we accept it?
Yeah. Are we doing the right things? Are we building the resistance strength of our
It's not just are we
organization?
doing the right things, it's are we saying the right things? Are we telling the right people the right things? Because a
Communication.
lot of this does come back to, we're sending up these reports that are super fantastic, make us look great, but are there glaring holes where things are being neglected, not intentionally, but just through the practice of business and maybe poor trade-offs that have been made along the way?
And that takes us kind of back to the metrics of why are we monitoring what we monitor? Why are we measuring what we measure? And what do we do about it? And is what we do actionable and correct? And it's those fundamentals, all the blocking and tackling. And maybe the operative piece is correct in calling us out on that. But on the other hand, I think there's a pretty simplistic model in play in the article of, well, it assumes that security has unlimited leverage or budget, and then there's not a lot of other things affecting security's capacity to affect change. So,
Right. We are beholden to the winds of the business, very much so, and often are seen as a cost center, which you can't make too many defenses that we're not. And it ultimately it comes down to, we are a cost center, but how much are we saving un in preventing incidents?
preventative
And
risk, yeah, it's a preventative model versus everybody goes ROI and show me the ROI. And you can certainly build an ROI around preventative, although you can always argue it's like, well, if it didn't happen, how do we know that you really saved anything?
right, and that's in a way, to keep tying this back to COVID. A lot of, with lockdown, it was, we're going to go into lockdown to slow the spread for 2 weeks. But once everybody goes back to their daily activities, then the the spike goes straight back up, because you can delay it, but you can't stop it completely. And if you do lock down permanently and you keep cases low all the time, it looks like you did all that for nothing, because you can't go back in time and say, well, let's see what happens if we don't lock down and how many deaths we actually have. It's, you have to accept the idea that the model of not doing anything
That is
is
correct. Yeah, and we saw that, when we started reporting quantitative risk items where people would try to second guess the numbers, pick
right, right.
small details, and why is Monte Carlo correct and how do I know how it's running? And
And is any predictive model ever going to be completely correct? No, that's part of why FAIR is great because it operates in ranges as opposed to a pinpoint value.
yeah,
But you have to, accept the fact that these predictive models are built off known statistics and known qualities and quantities. And this is our best estimation of what we could be looking at. Um, Now, it's not 100% like future telling, saying this is going to happen within the next 5 years. It could happen in the next 6.5 years instead. But the point is, it's going to happen at some point in the life of the business. Here's about how much it's going to cost if it happens soon.
well, it maybe then that what rather than talking about security metrics, this is a little bit more about risk management, about how we measure and manage the risk that we measure, right? And how do we measure it? And so we still have a lot of qualitative assessments where we go, well, that's risky. Why? Well, because I think it is.
Right, but you have to be able to break down those why do I think it is risky?
Right.
And that's where having a risk framework that you work in obviously helps because you can say, let's put this into a risk statement. What's the asset? What's the threat? What's the effect? And then let's look at that asset and see how well protected it is. What are my concerns at the possibility of this happening even valid? Is it so well protected that this could never happen? And then go from there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's a triage process, and you can do that qualitatively. And when you get to the significant scenarios and impacts, you can break those down, certainly to the right level because you can't do quantitative assessments on every single thing.
No, that takes too much time.
Yeah, it's got to be on items of significance, which begs the question. Then we go back to the article and talk about why are large significant things happening. And the bottom line is statistically, even if you've taken steps, they can still happen. They will still happen.
Absolutely. They will still happen because we are inherently behind attackers just by, tools we're able to use, ethics that we have to hold by, and business practices that we have to.
Yeah, we operate in a business, and if we've got aging systems or fragile systems, um, without regard for either of those things, they still are business systems that have to operate, and our ability to make large changes in them can be limited by the reality of operating in the business. And it's not because
Absolutely,
it's the
because
fault.
there is a level of, is this impact to the business worth it? And that's where your business impact analysis really comes back in handy.
Back to the BIA. See, that was see, I've thought about that one. I thought, well, if I can only ask one thing, I'd be like, show me the BIA. I don't care about your audit report. I don't care about anything else. Show me your BIA.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that shows a level of thought put into how you operate the business, how things flow, and how you would need to recover. Because recovery efforts are going to happen at different parts of the business all the time, um,
Yeah,
especially if you have multiple different locations. You're
different
always going to be
services,
dealing with an incident.
locations. Your service catalog for the company, how it operates, where it operates, who are the stakeholders. All those things should be in the BIA, as well as kind of the loss table around how much money are you going to lose if with this service being impacted or down,
Mhm.
and how much money should you spend to protect that segment of the business. So
Right. Is that segment of the business and its revenue critical to you staying afloat? Um, and that's where information security and business kind of cross over. And a lot of times that's seen as, the less interesting parts of information security is where that kind of BIA and compliance and audit and third party risk management and um, the paperwork of information security can be neglected because it's not as much fun as the rest of it.
Well, yeah, you know, so I've been on a couple of panel discussions in the last few weeks, and they want to talk about SOAR or SIM, MDR, XDR, you know, zero trust initiative. So they, and with zero trust, they always like, well, which product do I need to get zero trust implemented? And it's like, well, zero trust is a concept independent of a specific technology, and it's still dependent on your understanding how the business works and runs, because that's how you implement zero trust. It's
Right.
basically
It all comes down to information security is a series of processes that need to be tool agnostic. And these things like SIM and MDR and no trust or zero trust, they're all pieces that can be plugged into these processes to improve their efficiency or improve their performance, but they are not information security in and of themselves.
right. You know, I'm thinking, so, you know, when I was a teenager, we would order car parts from JC Whitney catalog, because if you got that really cool spoiler, you had to have that, had to make your car really cool. And maybe we're getting zero trust going, look at this awesome spoiler I added to my security program. Aren't I really kick ass?
But it's still a four-cylinder, basically lawnmower.
Yeah,
Like,
it's still a Pinto with a big spoiler and an
right.
aftermarket sunroof. At the end of the day, you haven't changed the vehicle, and maybe that's, you know, I'm thinking about, you know, we came into this talk thinking about security metrics, but this is really not just security metrics, because security metrics are part of risk management. And maybe the point is, are we managing and communicating the risks in an adequate way for the stakeholders to make the judgment calls?
And are we accurately focusing on the pieces of the process and the business and our jobs and information security that matter? Are we putting on a sweet ass aftermarket spoiler, or are we actually, looking into how we can get the most performance out of this crappy Pinto engine?
And there certainly are ways to maximize how any car performs, right? Even a
Right,
crappy
right,
car, you know, you can certainly maximize what it's capable of, and that might be good, you know, good enough for what you're doing. I'm delivering
right.
pizzas.
Not everybody needs a Maserati.
Even people that buy a Maserati probably don't need a Maserati, but yeah,
Well,
it's
nobody needs a Maserati. They're terrible cars, but
yeah, yeah. It's like, you know, the best part of the Maserati is looking at it when it's in your garage, because once you drive it, you'll yeah.
they actually, I read the other day, they lose the most money once you drive them off the lot.
Hey, you know, I'm not trying to bag on Maseratis, but yeah, the pickle fork thing, I don't know, man.
Okay, not everybody needs a Lamborghini. Some people really just need a reliable family car to get them from point A to point B.
And same thing for, you know, so, you know, think about security programs in cars, right? You know, in terms of performance, you know, so if I'm doing DoorDash deliveries, I need one kind of car, you know, and what's adequate for that, and it's about, you know, the safety, and yet all the cars have the same essential qualities on the outside: the wheels, tires, drivetrain. Um,
Right. It's all, a box with wheels and an engine in it and seats and a little wheel to steer it with. That's
fundamentally, yeah,
that's what a car is.
yeah, and yet, you know, if I'm you know, driving, if I'm going to a racetrack for a high performance driving day, well, then I need different things, different kinds of tires, different kinds of things for that. And are we equipping our
Right.
companies for the purpose? You know, so that, yeah, in terms of risk management, you know, we have to make sure that what we're building is adequate for the kind of company that we operate in.
Yeah, absolutely. Because if, a family of five comes home and opens up the garage and sees a super nice Porsche sitting there, the dad might be super excited, but as a mom, I'm going to be sitting there thinking, I can't fit any kids in there. it looks great and it goes fast, but it doesn't do what I need it to do, which is haul groceries. Like, it's just one of those things to that's fun to take out and spin around and tell people that I have and be like, look at this cool thing, but it's essentially functionless because all it does is sit in the garage.
And go to the garage. Yeah, the repair garage probably. Well, Porsche doesn't
Right.
do that. It's not a Maserati, but so we went full circle. We started out talking about metrics, and we came back to the fundamentals of risk management. So
Because that's ultimately what it comes down to,
yeah,
in my opinion. All information security is about risk management. And communicating that to the stakeholders and decision makers in a way that allows them to make their decisions based on holistic knowledge.
so yeah, why do we measure what we measure? We measure it because it's relevant to our companies. It's relevant for business leaders and executives to make decisions, and whatever metric and whatever that metric, whatever is within that metric in terms of, is 3% phishing the goal, or is 12% okay? And that just depends on your business. Don't compare
Right.
yourself artificially to, well, it has to be 1.8%. Why? Well, because I read an article that said KnowBe4 finds really good companies are at 1.8%. So, yeah, you achieved 1.8%, but congrats on the new plastic spoiler. You didn't need it.
Right, right. It wasn't the area of focus that you needed to be looking at.
But
Now,
you're
awareness
you're
training is always fantastic
yeah.
because that's going to prevent hopefully more future incidents by making sure your frontline people are aware of phishing emails
Oh,
and how to
yeah.
spot them.
I'm not arguing to have higher phishing rates, but
No,
yeah,
definitely.
yeah. No, I get it. 12% is not bad, man.
I guess I would say a more accurate, and this goes back to what you said earlier. It's like, yeah, we've got this really cool SOC as a service, but did you need a SOC as a service? Whereas everybody needs awareness training.
Right. Yeah. If I could only pick one thing, and I had this debate with myself where I was buying something, advocating for purchase, and I thought I should spend that on awareness. In the end, it's not that we're not doing that, but I really it wasn't. I openly debated that point with myself about if I could only spend the money in one place. I'd probably spend it on awareness training to make everybody else better.
Right, right. Because they are really, I mean, you can't stop all attacks from within IT itself or from within information security. You don't control what people are clicking on out in your business. And that's really where a lot of the real risk comes from is what your end users are doing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think we've seen the biggest bang for the buck in awareness. So rewind back, a few years at Werner. We invested in KnowBe4 very early when we were starting to ramp up, areas of security. And I think bang for the buck by far. I think of two vendors, in terms of risk management that I thought I never regretted spending that money. One was KnowBe4, the other was Kenna Security from a vulnerability management standpoint. I never regretted that spend. Unlike my GRC, but that's a whole nother story.
We won't mention those companies.
They who shall not be named. So we're advocating for risk management and talking a little bit of smack about GRC, IT GRC systems. So that's probably a good place to leave it. Any other closing thoughts? Because I've talked myself out on this one.
I mean, I want to circle back just real quick to malpractice.
Ooh.
To say that information security professionals are guilty of malpractice or are, I think it implies a level of maliciousness that isn't necessarily there. I don't think that we're out here trying to actively work against the enterprise or businesses, and by making them more open to ransomware attacks or anything like that. I do think it's a level of ignorance from both the business side and what is necessary, and the information security side and what is being communicated up to the business side. There's a fundamental friction there, where we're always going to be kind of working against one another, but we have to come to an agreement on some base foundational principles that really impact our level of security, and work on maturing those as opposed to plugging in all the pretty lights and colors and fun tools.
Right. Yeah. Otherwise, we've got the Clark Griswold Christmas lighting thing, right? We get the brightest
Right.
possible lights, and we show it to executives, and there's a disconnect with us and the executives, a disconnect between security and IT, and so you have multiple levels of disconnect, none of which are malfeasance or malpractice. It's just the reality of humans working together. And I had a side discussion with somebody from Gartner, and we were talking about the odds of a security program being correctly aligned with the business purposes, or just basically with the business from a risk management standpoint, is probably being about 1 in 10. 10% of security programs, in their estimation, were aligned correctly with the business to protect it.
To me, that would just say we have a fundamental communication breakdown then between the business and IT and information security, that
Yeah.
needs to be married and effectively, I keep saying effectively communicated, but it really is. It comes down to a communication breakdown and how we look at risk, how the business looks at risk, and how we both look at remediating those risks or ameliorating those risks in some way.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about one specific um, executive level meeting. I had a dashboard I created in a GRC that shall still remain unnamed, but I spent a lot of hours putting that dashboard together, and the vulnerability numbers went, I don't remember, they went higher or lower, but they moved. But one of the executive officers asked a question, which was, okay, that number did something, but what does that mean?
Mhm.
And this is quite a few years ago, but at the time I couldn't tell them what it meant. I said, well, it means the number went down, but what does that mean for risk to the company? And this again goes back to segues, over to why I crossed over into quantitative risk management and value-based, risk assessments. But yeah, the disconnect can be that we're reporting things that seem important to us, but they may not even may actually be important to the business.
Right. And so we need to know from the information security side what is important to the business, and how can we steer and direct our efforts to be meaningful to the business without causing significant business interruption.
Or if the interruption's there, we're going to communicate it. Here's how much
Right.
this is going to cost you. This is,
Right.
back to the BIA. Do we understand how it's going to impact the business? And if not, why not? That would be why. If I were on a board of directors, I would be all over that BIA. I want to see that BIA. I don't care if it takes us 2 days. We're going through that BIA.
Definitely. It's your baseline.
Yeah. See the relevance of knowing that security and IT understand the business. So, all right. So we went from metrics to risk management to
Business
BIA is the
relations.
cure to all things. We have found the cure. We found not just the sunroof, or not just the aftermarket spoiler, but the aftermarket wheels, spoiler, and sunroof. They're just going to make this car really go.
Oh yeah, definitely. We've definitely murdered out this Pinto.
All right. On that, I'm going to go ahead and finish. And, as always, I appreciate your time and opportunity to
Yeah, it was
talk.
super fun, Dave. Always having a blast.
Cool.